Alright. So I wanted to talk about the semiotics, which is like the use of symbols. Here, I'll get rid of this view. Alright, I wanted to talk about semiotics in game design. So semiotics is the use of symbols, and how we can kind of use it as a shorthand for a lot of things. So one thing I want to talk about is with playing cards, we have hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. At least in the most common kind of playing cards that are widely used now. And we use this symbol, this heart symbol, which, you know, goes back to the Middle Ages. It's like the first time that that was used as like a symbol of love or romance. But it represents the heart. It doesn't really, I mean, it looks a little bit like this shape here, but it doesn't have a huge resemblance to it. It kind of has more of like a leaf shape, and there's a lot of reasons behind that, but we call it hearts, and it kind of has its roots in or playing cards at least have their roots in tarot cards, which use cups, coins, clubs, and swords, or pentacles instead of coins. So like cups correspond with hearts, coins correspond with diamonds, clubs correspond with wands in tarot, and spades and swords. I just think that's interesting, and there's like a lot of gameplay implications that you come across with these symbols. Like, you know, cups can be like, you know, I'm toasting to your health. It's a social gathering. It's you know, it's romance. It's drinking wine together. But it can also be like treachery. Like, who do you trust someone to pour you wine and not poison it? Diamonds and coins obviously represent wealth. Clubs, they represent like brute force, but also when they're in the tarot, they're wands. They kind of represent wandering and travel. And swords are, you know, violence and war. And then there's this game designer who came up with Richard Bartle. He's a video game designer. He came up with this classification of different types of players. And so there's actions and interactions, and there's players and world. So like, killers are performing an action on other players. Achievers are performing an action on the world. So this is sort of like your completionist, your competitive player, your socializers who they want to interact with other players, and your explorers that want to interact with the world. And he used the playing card suits to sort of represent the different aspects, which I think makes a lot of sense. I kind of prefer using the tarot suits because I feel like they fit a little bit better, but you would have to switch explorers and killers, because explorers, in my opinion, should be wands and killers should be swords. Achievers being coins makes sense, and socializers being cups. But that's just it's just my take on it, at least. And I was also thinking about there's some correlations with the history of chess too. Let's see. So like chess is a super old game. So we have in the modern game we have knights that are represented by a horse, but in the older versions they had chariots and horses as separate things, and the rook kind of became what used to be the chariot. But again, like kind of going to the symbolism of it, you know, we use this to be a knight, and it's like, okay, that's a horse. It's a drawing of a horse or a carving of a horse, but it to us means it's a knight. And it moves the way it does because cavalry in war were really good at like cutting people off, so it makes sense that it makes sort of that L shape because it charges ahead but then can swerve, whereas like the rook, it was based on a chariot, which chariots don't turn super well, so they're good at going on a really straight line, which I think is interesting. Super old chess sets. Yeah, I've been like just going down this deep rabbit hole of learning about the history of different types of games and the pieces that we use and the reasons behind them and how those symbols relate to modern game design. So like one example, let me see if I can find it. So like we have here, let's see this. I want a high-res image of it. Okay, yeah, here we go. So here's the stat screen for Dark Souls. So we use this buff arm symbol here to represent strength. And we use a hand to represent dexterity. One thing that I think is pretty funny is like the name dexterity comes from Dexter, which means right hand. This icon's a left hand. Wait, there's a little bit of a mismatch there. I think compositionally it looks better as a left hand, but it is funny that we're using a left hand to represent dexterity. And we're using this buff arm to represent strength, which like in the game that correlates to like, okay, my right hand weapon is gonna do more damage if I have higher strength. But in the character creator for Dark Souls, there's like a muscularity slider, and that has no bearing at all on your character's actual physical strength. It's just an abstraction. And like everything in a game is an abstraction to some degree. I think this one's a kind of funny one. And like you could be at a super high level in Dark Souls, but Dark Souls has the hollowing mechanic where the more times you die, the more corpse-like your character becomes. But also, like, if you've been playing for a long time, your character might be a really high level, but they might be pretty hollow, so they look like a corpse, and they're all skinny and desiccated, but their strength, which here is represented by a muscular arm, is way higher than it was at the start of the game. And then they have humanity, which restores you back to your human form. It doesn't really affect your stats, aside from sometimes your health, if it's Dark Souls 2 or but it's also like a currency that you can spend, and it's interesting that like how human you are as a character in the Dark Souls games. It sort of represents like your struggle to keep playing the game, because it is a difficult game. It tells you prepare to die. You're gonna die a lot. And like hollowing is sort of a in-game way to represent like how close you are to giving up, in a sense. Like if you keep dying over and over and over again, you're likely to give up. But then you might realize, oh, I have a humanity that I can use to seek help. But in opening yourself up to help, you're also opening yourself up to invasion. It's just an interesting mechanic and some interesting symbolism there. Yeah. I don't know exactly where I was going with that. I'm just ranting about things I think are interesting in game design. And like some other uses of semiotics, at least from my experience in our game Job Simulator when I was working at Alchemy Labs. Let's see if I can find a good picture to represent what I want to say here. That kind of goes counter to what I was trying to... Okay, here we go. So in Job Simulator, you have a cartoony white glove, which, you know, we're used to in cartoons. Characters have white gloves. It kind of has a strange history, because it goes back to vaudeville performances and it even has a history with like blackface performance, but because in vaudeville, you know, they're wearing black, or unfortunately a lot of times they had their faces painted black, so in order to see their hands they would wear white gloves. And then when cartoons started becoming more of a thing, they carried that over, because they were sort of recreating vaudeville performance types with the animation. So we get this white glove sort of becoming synonymous with cartoon and kind of losing its whole original meaning. But that's kind of beside the point. What I was getting at is in VR, there's this concept of presence where, you know, your hands and your head are tracked. So it feels like you're actually there. But then when it comes time to pick up an object, you have an expectation for like how you would hold a different object. Like you'll hold a hot dog different from how you hold a coin, different from how you hold an apple. And it's nearly impossible to, one, animate all those different hand poses, and two, intuit what type of grip the player intends to have on the object they're reaching for. And so what they found when we were working on Job Simulator is you retain the presence that you would have with your hand being tracked in VR if we just hide the hand model and keep the object that you're holding attached to where it would be in relation to your hand. Your hand kind of your brain fills in the blank of, I'm holding an object. I can see the object that I'm holding. I know how I would hold this object. So your brain kind of fills in the gap of how your cartoon hand would hold it, even though there isn't a cartoon hand holding it. And we found that for the most part, you just don't even notice until it's pointed out to you that your hand is missing. So the object that you're holding becomes the symbol for your hand. What else did I want to bring up? So the context of the symbols that we use can change a lot. So like let's see. So like for example, in Breath of the Wild, hearts represent your health. That's how it is in pretty much every Zelda game. But we don't always use hearts to represent health. Like in the original Castlevania, hearts are your ammo for your sub weapons. And your health is little dots on a bar. So there's reasons to use hearts for meaning health. There's reasons for using a bar. A bar kind of gives you like at a glance like what percentage you might have. A lot of games even will show you the percentage of health you have. And like your bar will get bigger the more health you get, like in Dark Souls. But the numbers for your health in those games get really big. Like, you know, by the end of a Souls-like game, your health might be, you know, 800 or something or more. And it's hard for your brain to know, like, okay, I have, you know, 450 out of 689 health. But you intuitively understand, like, okay, this bar is like, you know, 3/4 of the way full or whatever. Whereas with Zelda, the you know, your hearts each represent 4 hit points more or less. And so Breath of the Wild, you get a maximum of 30 hearts. So you have like 120 HP. So these are more like a discrete representation of the individual hit points you have, whereas like in Dark Souls you have more of a continuous bar. There's pros and cons for both. It's just interesting that we use the same, you know, 3 hearts that you would have on a 3 of hearts playing card to represent the health. And so the context changes based on the type of game. You know, in a game like The Sims, you might use a heart to represent romance instead of health. Or your, you know, like your relationship with another character. So it kind of makes me think of, let's see. So we have this association, let's see, that rabbits eat carrots. But in reality, rabbits don't eat carrots. They like leafy things more. We only have this association of rabbit and carrot because of Bugs Bunny. And Bugs Bunny only eats carrots because he was a parody of a movie character who said "What's up, Doc?" and ate carrots. so much of what we think of as these symbols that go together, they're not really connected in any like real way. Whereas like you know, let's see, you might, if you see an image like, if you see an image like this, you get a rabbit and a hat, your association goes from just a rabbit and a hat to being magic. Because we're used to culturally magicians pulling rabbits out of hats, even though like I've never seen in real life a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat. It's just become this cultural phenomenon that we associate hats and rabbits with magicians. There's also like we have this image of Sherlock Holmes wearing this deerstalker cap and smoking a pipe, but that image comes from a specific actor. He's never in the book described as wearing this type of hat. We just through pop culture we have this association of Sherlock Holmes and that hat and the big Cavendish pipe that he smokes. And then, you know, like back to the rabbit image too, like you know, if you put a rabbit next to a tortoise, your brain goes to, okay, this kind of represents speed. We even use it in like icons. Like sometimes you'll see on like a lawnmower or something, you'll see something like this that represents, you know, this is slow, this is fast. So yeah, your the way that you connect things just changes a lot based on the context in which you see it. Games are all about just like stacking layers of abstraction and combining different contexts together in interesting ways. Anyway, don't entirely know where I was going with that rant. I just wanted to do a little stream that wasn't my usual stream, and I am quite tired, even though I haven't been going that long. But I think I might go ahead and wrap up here. My throat's starting to hurt from my rambling. But yeah, thanks for hanging out and listening to my semi-coherent rant about symbols in game design. I think I'm going to be taking a break from my usual working on my Zelda-inspired game for the month of October. I'm still planning on streaming. I think I'm just going to do some slightly different stuff for the month because I need a break from that game. And I have some other stuff I want to do in the meantime. So this rant was partially inspired because I want to submit a workshop for an event that's coming up, based around using different symbols that we know of, like chess pieces and playing cards, and combining them to make different types of games. And I also want to, there's a game jam that I'm going to try to participate in this month. So yeah, I think we're gonna switch it up and do it different this month. But yeah, I think I'm gonna go ahead and wrap it up here. Rest my voice. My allergies have been really bad the past couple weeks, so I'm struggling today. So let's see, who should I send you over to? I'll say hi to Catterday Night, playing Sonic Frontiers. So I will should be back on Tuesday. Not with the regularly scheduled Zelda inspired game, but we're still planning on streaming. So have a good weekend, and I hope to see you all next week. I'll get this raid kicked off. Bye.